Welcome to Straight Talk. I'm your host, Jan Watts, and in the studio with me today I have a very special guest, Cindy Yordy. She's a wellness consultant, and she has a remarkable story to tell. And you've been doing this for about 20 years now. You do it with herbs and minerals and vitamins, and and fortunately, when your husband got sick, you knew what to do for him, didn't you?
Yes. Some of those things we got to do right away, some we didn't.
You want to go back about a year and a half. He was diagnosed with cancer in the month of April, right?
Yes.
And what kind of...
I can show you what he looked like then.
Yeah.
Okay. This is him at that time.
Yes.
And then I'll show you some other pictures of what happened
As he went through the procedure. So what kind of cancer did he have?
Okay, it was lymphoma located in the stomach, and it was a tumor that was in the lower stomach. When he had symptoms actually when we look back on it for a couple years.
Oh, really?
Yes, and but he come to the point where he couldn't stand the pain any longer, thinking it was an ulcer. But he went in and got his scans and saw that there was a good-sized tumor and almost blocking the duodenum, leads out of the stomach. So he began right away to look at the research materials that I already had because of my background in nutrition and herbs. And one of the things we knew we needed to do immediately was to change the way the environment of his body. In particular, I mean the pH, being it was very acidic. And that was due to several things that he knew he was doing some lifestyle mistakes. So
like fast food?
Yes, and you know, there's a lot of stress involved. He was actually working 2 jobs at the time, and between the jobs he would not usually come home but rather go to fast food, and so that was a diet change was a definite must right away, and de-stressing his life. And then because of the environment that he's worked in and chemicals, he knew he needed to detox chemical-wise too. So, you know, there's various reasons why people get cancer, but really it's not just one thing. It comes about because we've done several things. The body is a survivor. It will overcome so many things for us until we get to where we've done too many things wrong, and then it strikes. But so we knew to go to the root of the problem, raising the pH, enriching the oxygen, because abnormal cell growth lives in a low oxygen environment and an acidic pH. And we knew these things basically from some of the great scientists of the past and the studies, and I had some doctors that I'd studied under. And then we knew we needed to detox the system. And the number one, I'm not really saying these in any particular order, but now I will, the number one problem that happens in the body for abnormal cell growth is where the pancreas is failing. So we began to do all those things, and the very day he changed his habits is when the pain left.
Oh, really?
In one day. It was gone.
One day?
It was gone in one day. And I'm talking about raising the pH a lot with juicing, and he went back to work almost immediately within a couple days, and we thought, well, we're on the right track, you know, and because we had some quick positive results. However, abnormal cell growth lives on sugar.
And sugar.
And so even though we may be doing some healthy things, like one of the things we were doing was carrot juicing. And later we found out that juicing is great, but not adding such a high sugar vegetable to your juice.
Carrot has a lot of sugar in it?
It does. So rather, we later, after we realized that problem, you know, went more to the cabbage, cucumbers, celeries, mainly the greens without the sugars. And so, but we needed to enrich the oxygen, so we gave him oxygen water and alkalized water. And he kind of went back to living normal for about 3 weeks. And as the tumor began to grow, we didn't, of course, know that it was. The only way to find his particular type of tumor was through an endoscope, where they actually go through the esophagus with the little camera and look at it.
sounds like fun.
No other scan. It did not show up on the blood or any other type of scan. So it wouldn't be the type of scan that you would go in and recheck very often. So, but the way he knew that it was blocked off totally and that the tumor was growing is because then he wasn't able to keep anything down. And it kind of came on gradual, you know, where he would have to throw up every few days, and then it was like all the time. And so for quite a few days there, he didn't eat or drink anything that stayed down, at least. So then we found out he was in big trouble. And so within the very thing that he wanted to do the least for this was the chemo, because he knew how toxic it was to the body and had seen a lot of devastation from other people. So even though it was his last choice, it did become his only choice at that time, that we knew of at that time. And so the thought was that, and the doctor thought maybe too, that maybe one chemo would shrink it enough that he would have a small opening again. And if that happened, then we would go back in with our ideas that we had already started, that were working to a degree, but be more aggressive with them this time. Well, it didn't work out like we had thought it would. The chemo did a lot of devastation to his body, and he just happened to have a very strong heart, which is one of the things they look at when they know how much chemo and what kind to give you. And so he had a strong heart, so they gave him a strong dose. And instead of helping, it did the normal things that chemo normally does to destroy the body, and there was not enough shrinkage to even open an opening. Even if there was, we don't really know because we didn't do a scan very often. So he was put on IV feeds, and he was then just surviving, basically. He was going through lots of infections. The port would become infected, and they have to redo it, restring it. He came down with pneumonias and staph infections, fungus on the lungs, about everything that anybody else has ever gone through. It seemed like that he had those things happening too. High fevers, cold chills, back and forth, shaking uncontrollably, huge amount of pain. In the herbal realm, we found an herbal pain buster, it's called, which would actually decrease his pain for several hours at a time by about 75%. So that was a lifesaver at the time, something to at least, you know, give us some relief.
So you're saying there are herbs that will help with pain? You don't have to take what the doctor gives you?
He wasn't taking pain pills or morphine or anything from the doctor at that time. While he was in the hospital, sometimes they would do a suppository because he was, you know, nothing by mouth with him. But he did also know the detrimental effects to the liver for taking, you know, a lot of the pharmaceuticals. So he wanted to do the least amount that he could do with that too. So that's why we, you know, stuck with what we could do naturally, everything that we possibly could do naturally. And so I'm a researcher, have been for years, and so my part in this, as well as taking care of him, was to continue the research. And because we know that from this and from our experience, you know, the successful people are those that actually go out and research their own ailment and find out what they can do and don't depend on the doctors for everything. You know, they have a certain realm that they're in, and there's a lot bigger picture involved than that small realm. So we knew to keep researching and not just settle in on that being the only answer, because at the time it wasn't becoming a success anyway. So my thoughts were we needed a intravenous, because he could only be fed intravenous, and we, of course it would have to be highly nutritional. And I was actually looking at the other countries, because in the realm that I had been with in the nutraceutical realm before, it was pill form only, and if it was a liquid, you know, it wasn't necessarily suitable for IV.
Right.
Okay. So what happened then the Lord led us through each of these steps. I mean, we know there was a purpose involved in what we went through, and the timing for us to find what we did find was his timing too. It was, you know, how you get down to the lowest sometimes before you get to come up.
And you go, God, where are you?
Yeah, and we learned
And he's
a lot.
there.
You know, we became closer to each other, closer to the Lord, and all of those things happened. We were growing through this, and we kept a good mental outlook. We knew there was always hope, and at one point when LaVaugh went back to get a third chemo, and he said to the doctor, if I take a third chemo, I know that I'll die. I can just tell because of how it worked with the first one, how it went with the second one, and we know that he knew that the third one he wouldn't make it. And so at that point he just said, I don't know how, but I believe the Lord is still going to heal me. And so he had hope the whole time. We had lots of prayer for us. So in the search, though, a friend of ours, it came from an unexpected source like normal.
Right.
A friend of ours who had been keeping track of his progress, or deprogress as it was, through the emails I was sending out to keep people informed on how to pray. Kurt came to me with some information in writing and tape and said, this is something you need to look at because I've been using it for my MS and I have gotten better in just 2 or 3 weeks now. And
Now you're referring to multiple sclerosis.
Yes. I sort of ignored him because I thought, now, Kurt knows LaVaugh can't take my mouth, and he's offering me something for him to take. And so I sort of set it aside, thinking, well, yes, so maybe it will be something I look into later. And he was pretty adamant about me keeping, he called me and leave messages on my machine because I was out working extra hours. And he would, you know, just keep referring to it. And finally one day he got a little bit fed up with me for not coming around and at least returning his calls. And he said, Cindy, LaVaugh needed this yesterday.
Got your attention, huh?
And I thought, well, maybe he does know something I don't know. And so I went to listen, and I found out that it was totally different from anything I'd ever heard of before in the realm I was studying with nutritionals. And so we tried, we tried using the water-soluble minerals just by holding in his mouth because, the subliminal effect and it will absorb and all that. However, that was too harsh for his stomach because some of it would drain down, and with every day he would have to throw up whatever gathered in the stomach, even though he wasn't eating or drinking. Yeah. The stomach has the characteristic of pulling fluid to itself, whether you're taking it in as an IV or however. So it would have to come out once or twice a day. So he had a very raw esophagus, and there in the middle of that large tumor in the stomach was a raw ulcer. And so the little bit that dribbled down through there he couldn't handle.
Yeah, I've heard his testimony, and he goes, oh, she gave me that stuff and I didn't want it. But we found a solution.
We did. Okay, so the next step was, okay, there's got to be another way. So that's when I said, this is water soluble. It looks like water. I believe I can use this as an IV. So I went to listen to the company product national trainer, and she explained to me that I wouldn't need to go to that trouble after all, because of the cell-ready design of this particular nutrition. It could actually be sprayed on, and the skin would absorb it just as if you took it by mouth, if not better. And it all made sense to me once I stopped and thought about it, because, in the realm before, in this study, they would always warn you to be careful on what you put on your skin, because the skin absorbs like a sponge, and it's, the largest organ of the body, and so not to be surprised that nutrition could go in if toxicity could go in through the skin, once we stopped and considered all those facts. And of course, Lisa Hill, my product trainer, she also had a unique experience with the water-soluble minerals, and so she could tell me personal experience, how it worked for her, and she actually took a bath in it.
Oh, wow.
So so I decided I could douse him down, and that was on September the 28th. So I went back to the hospital where he was and had been for 10 days because he was going through a bout of really serious illness, and it was the main thing they were trying to control at the time was pneumonia. And there was other things going on too. However, They had been using 4 different antibiotics and plus a nebulizer every 5 hours, and he was still in terrific pain from that pneumonia, and it barely touched it over after 10 days. So I went up with the spray bottles, and I began to douse him, and every 4 hours on Sunday and on Monday. And Monday evening, there was some change. Okay, and he was, of course, only doing this because he was doing it for me. He didn't feel like it was anything that was going to help, but I had the hope. See, you can sometimes hope. You can be the support person
Right.
and be the one that has the hope
Right.
for a while and take over. What is that mental outlook is so important. In fact, we know now that the positive attitude, the whole mental outlook part of getting well from something, towards your choice of treatment or just towards the whole situation even, has at least 50% to do with whether you get better or not.
Attitude means a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take a short break, Cindy.
Okay.
And we'll be right back, and you can tell us the rest of this amazing story.
Okay.
You've been watching Straight Talk. I'm Jan Watts, your host, and my guest today is Cindy Yordy. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm your host, Jan Watts, and in the studio today with me I have a wellness consultant, Cindy Yordy. She's been sharing her testimony of her husband's bout with cancer and how he overcome it, and one of the things she wants to share with you is the philosophy of wellness and the products that she used. So Cindy, we left off with your husband was having pneumonia, he can't take anything by mouth, he's overcome with you bringing these new products in for him to take after everything he's been through with the chemo and everything. Mm-hmm. So where are we now in the story? You walk in and you decide to spray these new minerals on his body, and he's like, yeah, right.
You're right, yes. He had a little doubt, but he just cooperated for my sake. And so I sprayed him most of the day Sunday, most of the day Monday, and Monday evening there were some changes. And what was happening was, I mentioned before that every day up until now, he would have to throw out what was in the stomach, okay? And well, this was the first night for 16 weeks that didn't happen.
4 months.
Yes, okay? And in addition to that, he told me that he could hear some gurgling going on in his intestines, which was really, you know, when you haven't eaten and had anything by mouth for a long time, you notice that. Plus, he had lost 85 pounds, so he could feel something going on in his intestines. So he decided to have, and they kept continually to have him try some things in the hospital. He decided to have a chocolate milk and a graham cracker. It sounded like something that might be easy on the stomach. So they brought that to him, and it stayed down. And so the next morning, he was scheduled for an endoscope. When they went in with a camera, you get to see those pictures yourself. They saw that the tumor, they said, was bigger than ever. In addition to that, they did not see any chocolate milk.
So he digested it.
So we knew it went through, not only because he could feel it, but it was an actual picture. So
Wow.
how unique is that you would get a picture of it? And the timing, and so he, after, of course, he couldn't have anything before a procedure like that for by mouth, but afterwards, he had his mind on another chocolate milk and a graham cracker.
I always think it's so funny. He went 4 months without food, and what does he want? A chocolate milk? I'm going, bring me a pizza.
On Tuesday afternoon, he did fine. He actually felt better. I was continuing to spray him. And Wednesday, doctor came in and, had a plan. And, of course, they didn't know of anything that I was doing or that any, LaVaugh didn't share with him what he had been hearing or anything. And so the plan was that they needed to, he was too weak for chemo, and they knew that, and there was no other procedure that they could do that normally is done for cancer. So they said, what we're going to need to do, since they couldn't do surgery on the actual tumor, is they wanted to actually remove the stomach.
Oh, nice thought. Yeah, I gotta go. Yeah, yeah, right.
So they were going to transport him right then to Wesley, and where he could get set up with the appropriate surgeons and all. They would have to go through a lot of different, everybody's input, you know, all the different doctors' input to get this correctly done. And he said, oh, wait a minute, you remember I have a severe case of pneumonia? And he said, yes, you know, I know what we're going through. It's risky, of course, but, you know, there is no other choice. So LaVaugh said, well, long story short, kind of, he just said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go home. Because if it's that serious, I do want to see my family and friends, and I will consider that. I don't want to just rush into something like that. So
that's a major decision to make.
Oh yeah, you don't make that kind of thing on the spur of the moment. So he just, you know, he said, okay, I understand where you're coming from. The doctor did, and said, okay, I'll give you 2 days. Go ahead and check yourself in to Wesley on Friday morning. This was Wednesday morning. And so LaVaugh called me up, come get me, and we continued our plan at home. Was spraying him. By the way, if he could drink a chocolate milk, I knew he could drink some minerals. And then because of the pneumonia, I wanted to get that, the silver is, it's not colloidal silver, but water-soluble silver into his lung area more directly. So I put the silver water into a vaporizer, and I was having him breathe the water, the steam actually, and continue to spray and take my mouth, and just being very aggressive with this. So the fourth morning he woke up, and he felt like the pneumonia was gone.
Really?
And he said to me, I know that pneumonia's gone. I can breathe freely, deeply. He could even sing.
Wow.
His ears had cleared overnight.
Now, I haven't heard your husband sing.
Oh, well.
Do we want to go there?
Mostly at home. So then, that same day, that he was, of course, feeling so much better just getting rid of pneumonia. And the pain of it was just horrific. And so now I have this picture to show you where he was the first morning that or the day that he could actually eat.
4 days after beginning the mineral program.
Right.
Wow.
And he was able to
He's looking a lot better there.
smile, and his color returned. He was feeling, I mean, he was feeling good. His, you know, he's lost so much muscle mass, and his way, you know, the way to get around was, you know, you could tell he was still a very sick person. But it's such a change just in that one thing that it was enough of a change to know he was not going to show up for surgery. That would be a total last, you know,
Last resort.
last resort. So we continued every day. He got a little bit stronger. He could take a few more of the minerals and the nutritionals that we were doing, the whole nutritional program with him. And some other things, we learned a lot of unique facts through this. I didn't know, but now I do know that 80% of the people that get cancer, it returns within 5 years.
Really?
And it's mostly those that don't make any changes. You know, we have to be willing to do what it takes to change the lifestyles or the habits that got us there in the first place. So if we don't do some correcting, particularly in our diet, but also in a lot of other things, because, you know, we need to detox physically, but we also need to detox mentally and spiritually.
Right.
And so the emotions that could be stored up in the organs that are causing things to be overloaded, and in the spiritual realm, bitterness and unforgiveness can hold toxicity in the body. And so we need to detox on a holistic realm, not just physically. So we look at the whole body when we're going to look for health.
Now, your husband, LaVaugh, is recovered, right?
He is 100%. Every day he began to return strength, and every day he could eat a little bit more, and so we knew that something was going on with shrinking. And we know that the body is the miracle machine. It is the one that heals itself. The nutrition is the tools and the building and material for the body to be able to do that. And so we know that any healing that goes on in the body is of itself. And so at the about 6-week period, the time frame of 6 weeks, he said he felt like he was cancer-free. And so we said, well, let's go get that scope scheduled. And he didn't get in for 2 weeks, but the day before Thanksgiving of last year, then he was declared cancer-free by the medical field. They did a biopsy and all that, and said that there was no more abnormal cell growth and no more Heliopylora bacteria, which was one of the culprits. And he was turned loose, cancer-free, go back to work if you feel like it, and
he looks
that's
great,
what he did.
Because I saw him Tuesday night, and I want you to look right into that camera there and give people your name and your phone number if they would like to have a consultation with you, if they have a member of their family or they themselves have a problem with cancer or any other health problem. Go ahead and give them your phone number.
Cindy Yordy, and we live in El Dorado. Our number is 316-320-9673. And I am a wellness consultant, so I do schedule consultations for any type of health problem. It doesn't have to be cancer, because the basic, whatever the health problem is, really comes down to all those same characteristics: the pH and the detoxing, oxygenating the system.
I want to thank you, Cindy, for being a guest today. I'm sorry we didn't have more time. I know you're just a wealth of information, but we've piqued their curiosity and they can have you out as a guest. Thank you for watching Straight Talk. I'm your host, Jan Watts.